Hey guys, it's Bayou from Top Table TCG here with a deck profile on Standard or D-Series Prison or Seraph or whatever we're officially calling it. Yeah, it's a sort of aggressive control deck that either wants your opponent ideally wants your opponent to waste resources freeing their units from the prison, or imprisoning as much of their cards as you can, so your grade 4 turns are become really strong. That's the deck in a nutshell, anyway. On to the actual deck. Usually I'd cover the ride deck, but I feel like covering the actual prison is probably the more important thing to do, since the entire deck kind of revolves around the mechanic this card sets up. It is a grade 1 set order. To activate it, you rest one of your units, and when you do, you soul charge free. While it's in the order zone, if your opponent could normal call a rearguard, they can do the following actions instead, which is Soul Blast 1, call one of their imprisoned cards to rearguard, or Cannon Blast 1, call two of their imprisoned cards to rearguard, neither of which are once per turn. To those unfamiliar with how Snow works, or how this deck works, is it focuses mainly on putting cards under this card, basically. They get stuck in there, and your opponent has to pay either a Counterblast or a Soul Blast to get them out. And while they're in there, your cards get a bunch of buffs, depending on the card. Yeah. Covering the ride deck next, we're using the standard Snow ride line. First with Ruby Red, has the standard D-Series effect. When this unit is rode upon, if you went second, you draw a card. I prefer the V-starters. Secondly, Kyanite Blue. When placed on Vanguard, search your deck for up to one prison, which is the card I showed you earlier, and add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. And when it's placed on rearguard, if one or more of your opponent's cards are in prison, you can play the cast, Counterblast, Soul Blast to draw a card. Not going to come up because we don't run any of it in main deck. But yeah, she automatically searches your prison from your deck to immediately set up the entire deck's mechanic. If you somehow lose the prison in between that, then I don't know how you'd do it, but the deck dies without it. The grade 2 from the ride line, Resort Pink. When it's placed on Vanguard, your opponent chooses a card from the hand and puts it in prison. So yeah, grade 2 ride, rip a card from the hand, at least temporarily. And on rearguard, if one or more of your opponent's cards are imprisoned, it gets 2k. So 12k on rearguard, although it's probably not going to hit there. And again, it's a one-of. Last card in the ride... excuse me. Last card in the ride zone deck. Seraph Snow. During your turn, if one or more of your opponent's cards are in prison, it gets 10k. Then if three or more, it gets a drive. Free triple drive, basically, if you're playing the deck. If you're just doing what the deck's supposed to do. And Vanguard, Rearguard, Counterblast 1, choose two of your opponent's rearguards and put them in prison. Yeah, just Counterblast 1, remove 2 rares. Ideally, you want to at least hit 3 cards in prison once you're on Seraph, just to get that extra card. Because being able to plus in this deck is very important. Since Snow, the deck as a whole doesn't really have that many ways of plussing. So honestly, any way you can find to plus in this deck, take it. Onto the main deck, 4 copies of the main boss of the deck, which is Seraph Purelight. When placed on Vanguard Circle, you can Counterblast one, Soul Blast a card with Seraph in its name, so that's either her or the grade 3 from the right line. Your opponent chooses 2 cards from their hand, rearguard, and soul each, and put them in prison. So most cases, instantly 6 cards in soul. If it's less than that, it's either because they have no soul or no rears or no hand, and if you're in that position, you're probably winning the game already. But yeah, she's the reason among just she's the reason you want to imprison as many cards as you can, because of her second confect, which is continuous. During your turn, all your front row rear guards get plus 5k for every 2 cards in the in your prison. If there is 10 or more cards imprisoned, all front row units also get a critical. So it makes your front row very, very scary, and also very funny if you happen to get the overtrigger. But yeah, generally the main reason, well, the biggest reason I should say, you want to imprison as many cards as you can is to at least hit 10 for Purelight skill. On to grade 2s next. 4 copies of Accused Macarite. When placed on rear from hand, Soul Blast 1, your opponent imprisons the top card of their deck face up. If there's 2 or more in the prison, she gets 5k until end of turn. So yeah, just helps build prison numbers. Comes in very handy when your opponent doesn't have rear guards, which is what this deck used to struggle against. If your opponent didn't call any rear guards at all, it is very it used to be very hard to put stuff in prison. But with stuff like Macarite and some other cards coming up, makes it a lot easier. Plus, Macarite can also help with deck thinning them out, so there's a chance that they deck out if the game goes on long enough, which has happened sometimes. Next grade 2 is 4 copies of Agra Rouge. She's your main body in the deck. If there's 2 or more cards, if there are 2 or more of your opponent's cards in prison, she gets plus 5k power and plus 10k shield. So she's more or less a constant 15k attacker and shield for a majority of the game. And she's good for both guarding and attacking. And her other skill is when she's placed on rear guard, you can Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's front row rear guards, and imprison it. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry that much about soul and counterblasts in this deck. I haven't run into that problem yet, unless the game like really drags on or it's a mirror match. But yeah, quick removal that saves you counterblasts. You have plenty of soul from just playing the prison, so it's not really a cost most of the time anyway. Next is 3 copies of Perio Turquoise. She's not 10k, that's a misprint. She's 5k shield. Her effect is during your turn, if there's 2 or more of your opponent's cards in prison, she gets plus 5k power. So like Rue, she's a constant 15k attacker, more or less. And while she is in the front row rearguard circle, if your opponent would call a card from their prison, it gets called with minus 5k power. This is to help dissuade them from calling stuff from prison, and if they do, hopefully either make the card called useless or just a lot easier to guard on your end. These do stack, so if you have 2 of these in the front row, then whatever your opponent's calling is getting a minus 10k. But I'm mostly playing it because it is a constant 15k beat stick. The second effect's just nice to have. Our last grade 2 is Cuff Spring. When she's placed on rear, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and imprisons it, and if they imprison a card, they draw one. Works on a similar principle to Macarite, just to be able to prison something even if your opponent has no rear guards. It's a little worse than Macarite, because it does essentially give your opponent a free filter, and also it doesn't have any power gain, but you don't really care that they get a free filter because your aim's just to get something in prison. But yeah, really good for when against decks that don't call things, or even against decks that do call things. She's just good in general. Onto the grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Suppressed Gleamer. We want 4 copies to make sure she's always active. If you have a Vanguard with Seraph in its name, which you will, after grade 3 anyway, well, from grade 3 onwards anyway, she gets plus 5k, so she's basically a permanent 13k, which means she's a pretty beefy booster, and in a pinch, a solid attacker because she hits numbers. Her other effect, when she's placed from hand, if there's 3 or more cards in your prison, you search a deck for a copy of her, call it to rare. So yeah, more board presence, always good, because it's the only card in the deck that does this. Next is 3 copies of Shovel Stud. Axe Scale, Counterblast, Soul Blast. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards and imprison it. Then, if there's 3 or more cards in your prison, you draw a card. He is really good against Bruce because it takes out their grade 0, and for whatever reason, at least from my experience, you take out their grade 0, for some reason they're just crippled for the rest of the game. I don't know why. It's just a common thing I seem to see whenever that happens. So yeah, field prison and an actual plus in the deck, one of your very few. So even if they don't have stuff to prison, it's sometimes just worth the Shovel Stud for the extra card anyway. And the last of our grade 1s, obviously the 4 perfect guards of Violate Dragon. When put on Guardian Circle, choose one of your units that can't be hit. If you have 2 or more cards in hand, choose a card from your hand, discard it. So yeah, perfect guards are perfect guards. I appreciate the brave effect they all generically have now. Lastly, grade 0s, obviously 4 heal triggers. I've got 3 of the vanilla ones from the trial deck, and one of the effect triggers from set 5. These honestly aren't that necessary. Their power-up effects are very situational. Vanilla triggers are fine. It's just nice to have. So if you got them, run them. If not, no big deal. I prefer the 15k triggers most of the time anyway. As I said, the effect triggers are very situational. Next, 4 copies of the effect draw triggers. Becomes 10k. Becomes a 10k shield if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or higher. Yeah, we want to run a playset of draws because, as stated before, the deck doesn't plus that much. There's a Shovel Stud and Gleamer, technically, and I guess Kyanite Blue, but that doesn't really count. Gleamer only searches itself though, and Shovel Stud is 1 card. So we're maxing out on draws because there's no actual way of searching our main boss. So we're basically relying on hard drawing it. We're not playing any more draws though, because regular draws are just 5k guards, and that's probably not going to be enough. I don't want to fill my deck with too many 5k guards. Next is 4 crits, 2 different artworks to confuse my enemies. Yeah, 15k shield and make sure attack hit harder. Next, 3 copies of the effect front triggers. Is a 20k guard if your opponent's grade 3 or greater. The extra 5k guard comes up a surprising amount. Buffing your front row is very helpful. And lastly, our over trigger, which is the Elder Breath, the Brentgate one. On reveal, standard over trigger effect. On reveal, draw a card, remove this card from the game, and a unit gets 10 million, 100 million even. And additional effect, if it's drive checked, double the power and critical of all your front row units until the end phase, which makes your front row stupid big. And I highly doubt your opponent is surviving that turn. So yeah, that was my deck profile on Seraph Purelight. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you. Goodbye.